Welcome back to the Scarlet Faithful podcast. I'm Aaron Brightman coming to you on Memorial Day weekend. Promised a mailbag edition a little later than I had hoped for. Wanted to get it out Saturday morning, but to no avail. Here we are getting this out Sunday night and wanted to thank everyone that wrote in. But before I do, wanted to remind you this episode of the Scarlet Faithful podcast is brought to you by Knights of the Raritan, the Rutgers NIL Collective. I have a link to the newsletter in the description of this episode on all platforms. Knights of the Raritan provides a unique way for athletic programs at Rutgers to be successful in the ever-changing NIL environment. Become a member of the Knights of Raritan for a chance to win giveaways, unique experiences, exclusive events, invites, and more. Helping student athletes. Sign up for their newsletter. It's free. Great info on Rutgers athletics. Keeps you updated. All aboard. So, wanted to cover some great questions in this mailbag edition, some big picture questions, and I'm going to break it up. So I'm going to focus on the Rutgers men's basketball questions that were in, that came in on Twitter, X, whatever you call it these days. Big picture questions in terms of the NCAA ruling with NIL and the future in that regard, as well as how it impacts Rutgers men's basketball recruiting in the future past this coming year. So those are all great questions. And that was Andrew Babb talking about the settlement, and also Brian McKenna talking about recruiting moving forward. I think they're interrelated to a degree, so want to incorporate those later this coming week. But for this episode, wanted to focus on two particular questions, both longtime readers and followers, and appreciate them both. John Jim Gochian, what would your starting lineup for men's basketball look like if PJ Hayes is the final edition of the offseason, and why? We're going to start there, and then we'll come back to Terry Flanagan, who wrote, Achilles heel of the 23-24 men's basketball team was the inability to gel, come together as a team, and they've had almost full roster turnover. What are the 1 to 2 specific things that need to happen for them to play better team ball next year? So I love both these questions, and I could probably talk for an hour on both, but I'm going to consolidate it into one episode that I think is manageable time for you to listen to on your holiday weekend. So let's start with John Jim Gochian. What would be your starting lineup for men's basketball if PJ Hayes is the final edition of the offseason, and why? So looking at the roster, also wanted to incorporate a quick question by Randall Solomon, who was asking about Ugonna Onyenso from Kentucky, the center. There was a tweet that went out a few days ago that made predictions for the top 25 transfers left, and it was they predicted that Onyenso would end up at Rutgers. I don't think that that's going to be the case. I don't think, in terms of where his NIL request is, in terms of his options, I just don't think that Rutgers is very involved right now, particularly because they recently hosted Jamie Benson, the 3-star 24 class that potentially could. He visited South Carolina, Kentucky. I think Rice is a real landing spot for him with Rob Lanier. He's from Texas. And he also visited Rutgers in the last week. And then also they recently offered Victor Mikic, who I've spoke about as well, in the 24 class. So because of that, reading the tea leaves, I don't expect them to get Onyenso. So I haven't heard that they're involved with them at all. He never visited. So I think it's just a random Twitter account that did this. It was a college basketball account, but still. Then some, a Rutgers publication, at least one, picked it up and, ran with it as a possibility. I really don't think that's the case. So that's for Randall. Thanks for the question. So in terms of how the starting lineup, how I see it, and obviously we're not even at June 15th yet when the team reports. And above all, and the reason I read Terry Flanagan's question before too is because I think these are interrelated in a lot of ways and really covers a lot of ground in terms of how I see the vision for this team, and also where I see the potential and how they can reach it as a team next year. So obviously, Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey, Sharpie them in. They're going to start. But I think it speaks to the versatility of this team, where Pikiell could go a lot of different ways. And let me also say that Pikiell has been on record many times that he really doesn't worry about the starting lineup. It's much more about who's on the floor in the final 5 minutes of the game. And that's the beauty of this roster, is both of those questions, starting lineup and who's on the court the last 5 minute games, could be a lot of different guys. And I think a lot of it's going to be situation based. A lot of it's going to be opponent based. Just certain matchups that they could potentially exploit. But at the end of the day, Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey are going to be on the court, 30 minutes a game. I was earlier in the offseason where people were talking about they're going to play 35, 38 minutes a game. No one really does that. And to ask that of both of them, they are as talented as they are, projected to make, to be NBA lottery picks next year. There's going to be a learning curve at times. And part of that is you need to be on the bench watching and learning. And also, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So listen, maybe Dylan averages 35 minutes a game, but I think it's going to be the low 30s. I think Ace as well. And then I think the third pretty much locked in starter would be Jeremiah Williams. And the beauty of Harper and Williams, and, I will say I was not concerned, but I did have questions earlier in terms of maybe how Jeremiah Williams and Dylan Harper, were they the best fit in the backcourt together? And now with the way that Pikiell has built the roster, I think that he's built the roster in a way that make them fit really well together. They both do a lot of the same things well. They're really both playmaking guards, combo guards that can handle the rock, that can, create offense for themselves and their teammates. They can get to the rim. Jeremiah's not the best long distance shooter. I think Dylan's going to be a better long distance shooter there. And I think he has a real potential with three. I mean, you saw him in that Jordan Brand All-Star Classic. He had 3 or 4 threes in a row down the stretch. I think he's still, it's not breaking news, but Dylan Harper is still evolving, and I think he's still getting better. He's put on some size in terms of some bulk, some muscle, some strength, and he just looks better and better every time you see him out there. And it's really unbelievable that Rutgers is going to have a guard of this talent handling the rock at the rack next season. But him and Jeremiah Williams together, I think starting backcourt, they could be as good of any backcourt in the Big Ten. I think things that people forget about Jeremiah Williams is that, he had that long break. He came off the injury. He, didn't start playing in February. There was some rust there. He also didn't have a lot of help down the stretch last season. So I think to even know the ceiling of his game as a player, I think he is going to, grow even more on the court this year and be even more effective. Again, teams aren't going to be able to focus on him. He's going to be probably third option on the court at all times with Dylan and Ace, and that's going to benefit him quite a bit. And his ability, to get into the lane, his footwork, he just, I think offensively, he's going to be even better this year and more efficient. So the backcourt, I think, Sharpie it in. It's going to be the one of the two, pretty much interchangeable, Dylan Harper and Jaywell. Now, Ace, he has versatility. You can put him at the 3, you can put him at the 4. Let's go to 5 for a second. So I know people had been hoping, are disappointed. NIL for 5s have been really, really high. Rutgers, has been named in terms of pursuing certain 5s throughout the offseason. Nothing really transpired. No visits that we know of. Nothing really got going because I think the NIL demands were just too high. Whether, Rutgers thought they were worth it, whether Rutgers could afford it, how they were allocating funds and, building out the roster. But I don't think it's going to happen. And, I understand people are concerned about that and they think it's a grave mistake. I've seen some people say a catastrophic mistake. It's going to cost this team down the road. So one team that I point to from last year that, I think could be a blueprint for Rutgers this year is Illinois. Illinois was not a, traditional Big Ten style team whatsoever. They did not rely on the center position for, heavy production. And they weren't a great defensive team. They were only 80th adjusted efficiency. A lot of games, they had to outscore opponents to win. They had one of the lowest defensive turnover rates in the country, 360th. But what did Illinois do really well? What made them a really good team? Athleticism off the charts, a ton of versatility, so many players that could play multiple positions, and they could run you to death. They had a really strong transition game, multiple ball handlers, multiple guys that could score, multiple playmakers, and they went to the Elite Eight, and they won the Big Ten tournament, and they finished 2nd in the regular season. One thing they did do really well defensively, 2 of the 3 games, 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 2 was they held opponents to just 46.8% from 2-point range, 38th nationally, because they had so much size in the backcourt and on the wings. They were disruptive. They weren't they weren't great defensively, but they were able to be disruptive because of their size, because of their athleticism. And I think if you look at what Illinois did last year, now the big difference with Illinois, or a key note, is that they had two elite playmakers in Terrence Shannon and Martin Damask. So the question is, will Rutgers have two elite playmakers? I think you could argue that Dylan and Ace could be. We don't know yet. Damask was on another planet, but remember, one thing to note about him, he came from Southern Illinois. He came from the Missouri Valley Conference. So I know there's a lot of questions and concerns about the lineup at Rutgers, and they don't have a lot of Big Ten experience, and that is true. But Illinois, arguably Illinois' most consistent and best player was Martin Damask, who came from the Missouri Valley Conference. So Terrence Shannon, obviously an elite talent as well. And, listen, I mean, Dylan and Ace, they don't have to be as good as both of them, but they could be. And, part of being projected lottery picks is potential and how quickly they can learn on the fly in college. I mean, they have elite talent, skill sets. But I think, I've talked about before Harper having great experience and being wise beyond his years as a basketball player. I think you're going to see that early on. And then Ace is going to be about consistency, and it's going to be about taking his game to the next level, focusing on the things that he does well, and also the team around him being able to support him. But my point is, I see a lot of similarities overall with Rutgers and Illinois. Now, talking about the five, in terms of Illinois, who did they have last year? They had Dane Danger, one of the best names in college basketball. Also love him. He was in the transfer portal. He was just 6'9". And then they had, nobody else other than 6'9", except for Coleman Hawkins, right, who's not a traditional five whatsoever. He's much more of a four. Top 500 block rate, top 500 steal rate, but not a traditional rim defender. He's a good rim defender. But, people are looking at Cliff being gone and Rutgers needing to replace Cliff. And offensively, listen, Cliff could exist. I'm not saying I wish Rutgers didn't have Cliff. I wish they did. But you have the opportunity there to continue to evolve your offensive style with how you play your five. And I think Lathan Somerville, and I know, people are concerned that if they're really going to roll with Lathan Somerville as their starting five. I mean, he's a top 100 recruit. He has a very interesting background in terms of being a guard, growing into his body, being, a stretch five, really. At 6'9", big body guy, he can play on the perimeter offensively. He has a shot away from the rim. How he defends, how he rebounds is obviously going to be a big question mark. But I think that Steve Pikiell and the coaching staff believe in Somerville. I think they believe in Igbole, who, again, he is a year removed now from injury. He's been working out, quite a bit in the offseason, and they've been really, really high on him. And I get the concerns that they don't have an elite five, a proven high major five. But at the same time, this team's not going to have everything. That's the thing. They're not going to have everything. And if that's kind of the position where, you don't have ideally, proven commodity with everything else they have and with how the roster's been built, you're not going to have everything at your disposal with the NIL budget. This is not a blue blood. I think people thought because they had Ace and Dylan, it was just they were going to have, NIL to spend at every position at a really high level. And it's just not the case. But I think, again, it's all about fit and how they're building this. So yes, I think Lathan is ultimately going to start at the five. I think they're going to rip the Band-Aid off. You're going to have three freshmen starting. It's going to make people nervous. But, hey, do it in the beginning and learn and grow. And what this team is in November versus what they are in February and March will be very different. And if those three freshmen can grow up and really hit on their potential and raise the ceiling of this team, that's a big part of what it's going to have to happen for this team to reach their potential as a team. So in terms of that, let's just say hypothetically, Dylan, J. Will at the 1 and 2. Let's call Ace the 4. Let's call Somerville the 5. The three, you could go multiple ways. You could start a 3-guard backcourt and have Tyson Acuff as the third guard. You could play PJ Hayes. You could play Zach Martini. You could go Jordan Durkak. You could go any four of those guys are interchangeable at that fifth spot. And what's exciting about that is the bench, because, Pikiell loves to say this, but you're going to hear this a lot. He's going to have 8 or 9 starters on the team. That's what he's going to say. I guarantee it. Sharpie. The point is, he really could interchange his starting lineup based on matchups, based on opponent, based on situations. I think just the versatility, the lineup versatility that he's going to have is really exciting. And I think that it's a strength of his as a coach to be able to find matchups that exploit the other team. How he's always, year after year, been able to more times than not, take out the best player on the court on the defensive end, with how he's able to defend that player and throw multiple players at him, multiple looks, the way they're going to be able to scheme, the way that we're going to be able to press, the size they're going to have on the press. But one lineup that is really intriguing, you have Dillon, Jaywell, and Ace, right? And you put Martini and Hayes in there as well. You have 4 guys there between 6'5", 6'6", and 6'8". You call it small ball if you want, but no one's smaller than 6'5". And then you put Martini and Hayes in the corners on offense. You have Jaywell and Dillon up top, and you have Ace roaming all around. And you're going to have that for teams to defend that, between Jaywell and Dylan Harper, their ability to get to the rim and create. If you double down on them, you're going to have wide open Martini and Hayes on the corner, who can hit corner threes, are spot up shooters. Martini 38% last season, Hayes 40%, both high volume 3-point shooters, both with size, both with quick releases, both can shoot over the defense. If you leave them alone behind the perimeter, they're going to make opponents pay. And then if you go single coverage on Dillon and Jaywell, more times than not, they're going to beat their man. And then if you have Ace kind of roaming around, setting screens, getting screens set for him, running the baseline, movement, he's going to be hard in open space to move. So I just think that potential offense, again, defense, they have to hold up. But without any doubt, what Steve Pikiell does best is scheme defensively. And they haven't had the offensive acumen. They haven't had the versatility offensively. They haven't had the shooters. They haven't had the ball handlers. I mean, that's the other thing I love about this team is all the ball handlers they have between the entire backcourt, with Jaywell and Dillon. You have Durkak, you have JaMychal Davis, and then Acuff. All those guys can handle the ball. All of those guys could run the offense. So the other thing, too, is that we haven't even talked about is the 2 other freshmen, Bryce Dortch, a wing, 6'8". He's going to be – there's been comparisons to Caleb McConnell. Obviously, that's high praise in terms of his defense. Dylan Grant was a little bit of a wild card because he didn't play this past year, but the staff is really high on him. He's 6'7", but he's a strong kid. I mean, he could end up playing some of the 4. And that kind of leads me to Terry's question. And Terry's question was talking about, last year, the deficiencies in terms of the team not coming together on the court, and what are the 1 or 2 qualities that they need to be able to be successful this year. And so I think at the end of the day, it's putting winning above all else. That's the number 1 factor. But within that is so many other factors. It's the chemistry on the court. It's the chemistry off the court. It's leadership on the court. It's having true hoopers in the roster who live in the gym, who want to constantly get better, and they are willing to accept roles for the better of the team to win. The culture, obviously, we know what the culture the program is with Steve Pikiell, but I think the us against everybody mentality. You're going to have Dylan Harper standing up there at press conferences talking about how nobody believes in them, how they're going to prove everybody wrong. And that was one thing I was concerned about, earlier a few months ago when they had Dillon and Ace coming in, and depending if Cliff stayed, I was worried they were going to be projected top 10 team, and how that mentality of how being the hunted and not the hunter, how being all this national hype was going to impact the mentality of the program. And now I'm not concerned at all. They're a French top 25 program. Bart Torvik has them now. They were 33rd before the addition of PJ Hayes. Now they're ranked 26th. He's an analytical website, great site. Just in terms of preseason projections from analytics site efficiency, has them 26th now. they're going to be right around that fringe top 25, probably by national media. Probably be a trendy pick to be in that 20 to 25 spot, but by no means are they going to be heavy favorites to win the Big Ten. It might not even be a top 4 Big Ten team pick in the preseason. I actually think they won't be. So there's certainly question marks with this team. Can it all come together? I just think also basketball IQ in terms of this team making the right plays. That's where experience comes in. Having guys like Hayes, Martini, Acuff, big question mark in terms of just being the guy at Eastern Michigan. The thing I love about him in terms of his mental toughness, he's been through a lot. When you're the best player on a losing team, you get the opponent's best shot every night. You get doubled every night. And he was the number 8 scorer in the country last season. And he was to do that, you have to go through it, and you have to overcome a lot. You have to learn a lot. So for him to be at Rutgers now, he'll be the 3rd or 4th offensive option on the court. He's going to have a different role. Can he embrace that role? Can he do whatever that is, 2 or 3 things better than as good as possible? He's a really good free throw shooter. He can get to the rim. He has a low turnover rate, which was really impressive in terms of how high his usage rate was. Acuff, Martini, and Hayes, all top 250 turnover rates last year nationally, 10.5 or below. That was a trait that you saw Steve Pikiell get. Very good free throw shooters in Acuff, Martini, and Hayes. Durkak, not bad, 71%. Did have a high turnover rate, but he has a high assist rate. But all those guys, right? Durkak was a conference player of the year, defensive player of the year. Can he accept his role? Will he come off the bench? Can he be the guy to help run that offense and do multiple things to help his teammates win? Acuff and Durkak, I think, in terms of accepting roles and finding their niche on this team is going to be essential to winning. I really do. I think the competition starting on June 15th, because listen, 12 players aren't going to play the whole season in terms of quality minutes. And that is a key. And that's where it was Steve Pikiell. When I went back to what did I talk about? Winning above all else. And players are going to have to accept roles. And it's all fun and games until the season starts and the games start and the minutes start counting and the stats start counting. Who is going to be mentally strong enough to adapt and accept a smaller role than they probably wanted, but a role that's going to be huge and very important for this team to win? That is going to be the key above all else. And that's where Steve Pikiell driving the bus is going to be so key and getting everyone to buy in. And it starts on June 15th. And that is going to be critical to this team's success. But if you look at those 12 guys right now, I really think any of them can play roles next year. And that includes Grant and Dortch. It's just going to, and that's where it comes to depth. That's where it comes to, potential injuries. Things are going to happen along the way. Steve Pikiell always talks about obstacles along the way that you have to overcome. There will be obstacles. This will not be a straight line trajectory for this team next year. There's going to be peaks and valleys. It's going to be a roller coaster. They're going to go through it. This team is going to lose 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 games, whatever. Good basketball teams in college basketball lose games. And it's going to feel like the Super Bowl. And every time they lose, there's going to be a meltdown of some percentage of the fan base. But it's all about this team growing together, gelling together, believing, living in the gym. And again, the positional versatility, the lineup versatility that they're going to have, the skill sets that certain guys have, the shooters that they have, and Hayes and Martini now, the potential that Dylan and Ace have as 3-point shooters. I still think Tyson Acuff can shoot 3. He has 2 seasons of 35% or better. With high vol, in that role, I think he can knock him down. Durkak is going to be like a Swiss Army knife in terms of what he can do. We haven't even talked about JaMychal Davis. How much run is he going to get? There was a time last season where he was a great ball distributor, great ball pressure. He's going to be useful as well. So God bless Steve Pikiell having to figure out the minutes on this team. But this is the most talented roster Rutgers has had in a very, very long time, and the most depth they've ever had under Steve Pikiell. And again, that's where I think he can cook the best, just in terms of being able to exploit matchups, find the weaknesses of the other team. And I think that's why game to game, you're going to see certain guys log different types of minutes, because it's all going to be matchup based. It's going to be situational based. If guy gets into foul trouble, how they interchange players. But Rutgers is going to have immense talent, immense versatility, And defensively, rebounding, I get the concerns. Inexperience. Those are the big three concerns. But in terms of what we talked about with the how many players could start, how many players can be useful down the stretch, and just in terms of the mindset of this team, what this team needs to do to be able to reach the potential, it's all there. It's just a matter of having pushing the right buttons, making making the recipe come out right. And I think that's where you have to give Steve Pikiell the benefit of the doubt. Couldn't be more excited about this coming season. And really, it starts June 15th. And can't wait to see this team on the practice court and just how they look, how they come together. But this offseason is going to be critical for them now. Will they add a 13th spot? It's looking like it could be Mikic or Vincent, high school player. And we'll see what happens there. The vision is clear. Again, I'm going to point to Illinois. Another thing, last thing in terms of coming together as a team in February and March, look at what NC State did to go to the Final Four last year. They weren't even they weren't a top half ACC team. They were about to get eliminated on the first day of the ACC tournament by the worst team in the league, one of the worst ACC teams in history in Louisville. And all of a sudden, everything clicked. And why did it click? Because everyone accepted their role and everyone made winning plays. And that's the other thing. Rutgers cannot rely on Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey to win every game. Everyone's going to have to make winning plays. And I think that, again, speaks to the depth, speaks to the versatility, speaks to the skill sets of what Steve Pikiell has built around Dylan and Ace. The blueprint is clear. And I think between Illinois as what they looked like last year as a makeup of a roster and the success they had in the Big Ten, and then you look at what NC State did to make that run down the stretch, I just think that you can look at this Rutgers team on paper and you can see both of those teams as a type of vision where this team could ultimately be. So again, I've said before, people that are calling for the Final Four, you can't predict that. March is unpredictable, but it's what is gonna make this team the most successful. What do they need to do as a team to reach their potential and reach their ceiling? That is the key. And then it'll all come together from there. I rambled quite a bit. I hope you enjoy this. Hope you have a great holiday rest of your weekend. Be safe. And I'll be back early next week with more. If you're watching, this shirt is from Night and Day Apparel. Use Scarlet Faithful as a 10% discount code. They make great stuff. Have a full Scarlet Faithful line as well. Shirts and hats, even a basketball design as well. Thanks so much for listening and watching once again.